For more on what this means for Canada, we turn to Perrin Beatty, the former president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He's also a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, currently on vacation, but this topic was too important for him not to take a break from his break to join in on this conversation. Mr. Beatty, you say the problem with tariff wars is that they are like nuclear wars, no winners, just losers. The key is to avoid them, but it seems like there's no avoiding this one with the new U.S. president. Are there any steps, aside from imposing our own counter tariffs, you believe our federal government could take to mitigate the damage of tariffs on our economy?
Well, the first thing is do what we can to avoid it. We don't know how long we have to do that. Mr. Trump he issued an executive order yesterday talking about April 1st for a report. Then he talked yesterday and today about February 1st to impose tariffs. We simply don't know what time's available, but we should use every effort that we can, all the times available, to try to persuade the U.S. administration that tariffs would be a very bad idea, not just for us, but for them as well.
The PM is saying today, dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs are on the table. What implications could that have in this country for consumers?
I think it's important that we understand what we're saying to the Americans applies to us as well. That it's not governments, it's not the foreign operations that pay for tariffs. It is your own consumers and your own businesses. Tariffs drive up the cost of living, and they drive up your the challenges for your business to be able to survive. And that's why we've worked so hard over the past several decades to bring down tariffs between countries, because everybody loses at the end of the day. And so it's a last resort. It should never be a first resort.
And you also say that tariffs are generally used anyway to settle issues of commerce, but it seems President Trump is using them as political leverage here. What do you think of this tactic?
Well, that's the challenge here. We simply don't know what his bottom line is. The goalposts keep on changing. They seem to be infinitely adjustable. First of all, he was talking about, well, we are going to do this unless the Canadians do something about fentanyl on the border. Canada's announced $1 billion program for the border. He hasn't even acknowledged that. Then the justification was, well, we're running a trade deficit with Canada, so we're going to use this to deal with that. Then we're hearing that the Wall Street Journal just moved a piece which suggests that what Mr. Trump is trying to do is to accelerate the free trade negotiations for CUSMA and to try to get leverage in that. You simply don't know. There's no basis where you know what's going to satisfy him. And as soon as you try to deal with one aspect, he brings out the same argument against another. That's not the way this was done in the past. In the past, you would use tariffs to redress an imbalance where if somebody was subsidizing your products being sent into your market, for example, you would apply tariffs to equalize things. In this case, he's acting more like the Chinese do, to say, we're going to use economic levers to force the people across the table to bend to our will.
You say we should avoid them at all costs, 12 days until February 1st. How likely do you think it is that we could reach some kind of deal to avoid implementation?
I think we all have to be realistic that he seems bent on moving ahead with this, but we shouldn't spare any effort to avoid them if we can. Then we have to look at how do we respond. It's too early at this point to say exactly what that should be because we don't know the timing. We don't know the scope of them or the scale. Is it going to apply across the board? Is it in fact going to be 25%? Are there conditions of some sort? We'll need to have plans in our back pocket, but keep them there until we know exactly what it is that we're dealing with. And then we've got to focus on the longer term. How do we build our economy and give ourselves options so that we can't be held to ransom by Mr. Trump or by any of his successors?
Before I let you go, I want to ask you, you're down there in Florida. Any talk about this stuff among the Floridians and the fellow Canadians vacationing down there in Naples?
There certainly is among the Canadians. Canadians are very much aware of this. Among Americans as a whole, there's not the same awareness. They're not aware of the situation in terms of Donald Trump's threats about tariffs on Canada and about the impact this would have on prices here in the United States. And this is one of the reasons why we need to do much more as Canadians to get the message out in the U.S. about how damaging these tariffs would be for the United States. It'd be a self-imposed wound that they would have.
That was Perrin Beatty, former president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, joining us from Naples, Florida tonight.